Welcome to Advanced Data Analysis 1 with me, Erik Erhardt, Professor of Statistics at the University of New Mexico. In this video, I'll help you get excited about using RStudio and Markdown to create beautiful and functional documents. So here we are at the course website, and I'm going to scroll on down to the timetable for our introduction. So we're going to take a look at this R Markdown introduction in a moment. But first we're going to go directly to RStudio and look at the default R Markdown file. Alright, so here we are looking at the console window. I'm going to press Control L right here. Control L clears the console. Here we go. And let's just start with a blank screen. First thing is I'm going to go over to New, and then we've got some options. We can create an R script, an R Markdown file, and there's a few other options we have. We're going to do an R Markdown file. So I'm going to click there, and it will create, it will give us these options for what we want to title. Let's say my first R Markdown file. And my name's there. The default output is HTML, though we can make PDFs if we have LaTeX installed, or we could create Word documents. We can also make presentations like slideshows and Shiny apps, and there's other templates available to us. So let's accept the HTML R Markdown file here. Now it opened up the editor window, and I'm going to make the editor window larger by clicking the maximize on this window up here. It's going to shrink the console below. Click. And notice that's all the text that's here. There's not a lot. Let's compile this to see what this produces, then we'll come back to see how it was made. So first I'm going to click knit HTML. It's going to ask me to save this file. So I'm going to save it onto my desktop where I dump stuff that I don't need, just as a working place. I will delete it afterwards. So I'm just going to call this file test and click save. You can't see it, but on my desktop a test file has been saved there. It went through the process of knitting the document and producing the HTML. Now I'm only recording a small portion of my screen, so I need to resize the window to fit into the recording area. There we go. And here's the document that was produced. My first RMD file is large. It's the title, my name, and date. And then we've got a couple paragraphs, some R output. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And then a plot that was created. And then finally a line at the end. That's the whole document. I'll scroll back to the top. Let's go over to RStudio and look at the editor to see what produced this file. Oh, by the way, I use Alt-Tab to switch between programs. Okay, I hold down the Alt key, press Tab, and you can go to any other window. But the last window you looked at is one tab click away. All right, so let's make this window large. The first part of this Markdown file, by the way, Markdown is a cute name for one type of markup language. You're already familiar with HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. The ML of HTML is markup language. A markup language is effectively a text file that uses special codes to indicate how text should be typeset. So you may be familiar with, in HTML, you have, if you put into square brackets, or rather those triangular brackets, for example, if I wanted something bold in HTML, I would say B is bold, this is bold, and then you do /B, and okay, that indicates that those words between the B and the /B markers are to be made in bold font. So that sort of markup is what we mean. So Markdown has its own syntax for marking things up, and we'll go through the syntax in the second file during this presentation. So this document starts with a few lines inside of triple dashes. Okay, this is called the YAML, and I still don't know what YAML stands for, Y-A-M-L. If we go to the Help Markdown Quick Reference, that'll open up the help window for information about Markdown, including how to use italics and bold, different headers, itemized lists, and so on. All right, so I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm back in the editor window on the left, and it says this is an R Markdown document. Markdown is a simple formatting syntax for authoring HTML, PDF, and MS Word documents. For more details on using R Markdown, C, and we have a web address here, rmarkdown.rstudio.com, inside those greater than less than symbol brackets. So let's go look at what that looked like. If we go back to where it was viewed, we've got that sentence, and then we have a clickable link. All right, so it's pretty easy to make a clickable link just like that. Notice the next sentence has, when you click the knit button, the knit is bold, etc. So let's go back. When you click the knit button, we've got double asterisks. Now bold, if we look over at the right, for emphasis, bold can be double star, or it can be a double underscore. If you wanted something to be simply italics, a single asterisk or underscore will do. All right, then we have our first code chunk. R helps us out, or RStudio helps us out by highlighting this in gray to indicate where a code chunk begins and ends. It starts with these three left-handed inverted commas. So the single left quote in the top left corner of your keyboard to the left of the number 1 on a standard American keyboard. If 3 of those starts a code chunk. The second part here is in curly braces, and I really only need to say braces because that means the curly ones. And inside the curly braces, there's the letter R. That means that the R programming language, and it can be a capital R, it doesn't matter whether it's capital or lowercase, it means that the statements inside the code chunk are to be interpreted by the R programming language rather than some other programming language. So there's a data set in R called cars, and if we bring up the console window and I type cars and press enter, it will display the cars data frame. There's a column for speed and there's a column for distance. And if I scroll down to the bottom, we see that there are 50 rows in this data frame. And let's just look at a couple of things. str cars is the structure of the cars data frame. It tells us that the data type is a data frame. We'll learn much more about that in this course. It has 50 observations and 2 variables. It tells us that there's a speed column and a distance column. They're both numeric, and these are the first values that appear in that data frame. All right, so if we ask for the summary of cars, I'm going to notice I have my cursor on the summary line, and I'm going to hold down the control key and press enter. That's going to submit that line up from the editor window down into the console and run it. Okay, here we go. Control enter. So summary of cars came down here, and what summary did was it gave me the 5-number summary and the mean for each column of the data frame, speed and distance. So let's see how that looks in our document. I'll switch windows to the display. It shows the command that was run, summary cars, and then the output of that command. Wow, this is powerful. That means that I can write text and code in the same document and get the output for that data set that I'm looking at. If I somehow change the data set and recompile, all of my results will be current. That's power. All right, let's go back. There's a few more things to do here. It says here you can also embed plots. For example, we have plot cars. So let's just run plot cars in R. So again, I've got that line highlighted, or my cursor's on that line, and I'm going to press Control Enter. I think that there's a way to do that up here too. Oh yes, this run line says run the current line or selection, Control Enter. So you can also click here, but why take your hands off the keyboard if you don't need to? All right, so let's take a look at the plot that popped up. We've got speed and distance on the horizontal and vertical axes. So cars, the default for plot is to plot the first variable, speed, as the x-axis, and the second variable, distance, as the y-axis. And so we have got a scatter plot here. And there should be 50 points or close to that. There may be some points laying on top of each other. For example, there's 2 right here that are very closely laying on top of each other. So let's go back. Oh, one more thing in this thing that we see. We've got in our curly braces, we have R, comma, and then some options. And there's lots of possible options here. This first option is echo equals false. What that means is that the commands that are in this code chunk, should those commands be echoed out onto the document or not? The default is true. In here, echo equals false means that when we look back at the document, it says you can also embed plots. For example, our code was right there where my mouse is moving around, and then the plot appears. But because echo equals false, we don't have the command there, as we did above when we had summary. So we can also hide the code and just show the results. And then this last line is note that command blah blah. Okay, so that is our first introduction to using Markdown within RStudio to create a document. So let's look at a little bit more formatting stuff. I'll close this document. We don't need to save it. And I'm going to go to Open, and we'll open the R format help file. Now this file on the website is this RMD intro file. And if I click it on the website, it looks like an R Markdown file. It's got this YAML header, which we'll talk more about in a moment, and then it has some other stuff there. So we'll go through that. Let's go to RStudio. Let's go ahead and compile this. Take a look at it. We've got our title, R Markdown formatting help. We have a date. There's no author this time. Let's go back to the editor and take a look. So here we've got, within the header, we have different commands. Okay, we have a title, colon, space, command, and after that, within quotes, whatever appears in quotes becomes the title. We have an author command, and this time I left it blank. Last time I had it as Erik Erhardt inside quotes. And this time, you noticed, no author appears. We'll go back. The date appears, and then output. So this output, there's 3 different types, right? There's HTML, there's PDF, and there's Word document. And there are many other options that can be put inside this YAML header, but that's enough to get us started. The rest of this document shows how to format within Markdown different styles. So for example, we have a sentence here that says if you want to make something italicized, use single dots. If you want something bold, you can use double dots. That's what we saw previously over to the right under the emphasis sections. And if we switch over there, we see italicized text and we see bold text. Okay. As you're writing, you may want to organize your writing with headers. Header 1, header 2, header 3, and the way you make these are with pound signs, single, double, and triple pound signs. We can add some text between these headers. This text is after header 1. This text is after header 2. And recompile the document. And we'll see that we have text now there too. And I'll reposition my window here. All right, let's redo that part. Let's add some text between these headers. This text is after header 1, and this is after header 2. And recompile, and we see that we have text there. Okay, so you can organize your documents using headers. Finally, we have lists. We have bulleted lists. These are itemized lists. Item 1, item 2, and then under item 2 we have 2 sub-items. And then below we also can have numbered lists. 1, 2, and then you can mix them. Numbered list and then itemized list. Let's see how those are typeset. I'll page down. Oh, I should scroll actually. It's hard for you to follow if I page down. All right. So that's everything. So here is the itemized list. You start with asterisks on the first level, and then you need to indent 3 or 4 spaces before putting a plus sign and then adding items. When you do enumerated lists, as below, you simply put 1 period, 2 period. So if I wanted to change this, if I wanted to keep, if I wanted also to have an enumerated sublist, item 2.2, let's say 2.1, and recompile this at the bottom. Now I have 1, 2, and then I have sub 1, sub 2. So it pretty much works very intuitively. The thing you would type without thinking is the thing you actually type to make it work. Sometimes, I should say, the things don't quite display the way you would like them in this RStudio browser. And so you can click this button here, Open in Browser. So I'll go ahead and click that. It opened a new tab, and it found the file on my desktop, the HTML file, and it rendered just fine. Maybe one last thing I will discuss here, if I go to RStudio, is let's look through this Markdown quick reference. So we saw how to bold and italicized, and how to use headers, and how to use lists. Okay, there's a few other things that you can do here. If it's important to you to have text on different lines, then end a line with 2 or more spaces. So you don't see it here, but if I click and drag, notice there were 1, 2, 3 spaces after that line, and that gave us a manual line feed. There's ways of putting links in there. We already saw you can just simply copy the link in there. If you want to have a link like example.com be linked to a phrase, like linked phrase, put that phrase into square brackets and then use parentheses around your HTML link. There's ways of inserting images. Okay, so I'll let you experiment with that. We've got R code blocks, but also there will be times, we'll see in the next video, where you want just for text to be displayed verbatim or pre-formatted without being evaluated by the R language, in which case you'd simply put the double or the triple backticks. Okay, there's some other options here. If you we'll see tables in the next video. And finally, equations. So if you want to typeset equations, it's actually very easy, and it uses LaTeX styles. So let's go to the top of this document on the left, and I'm going to give myself a little space here. Oops. and type, here's an equation. Okay, how about a squared plus b squared equals c squared is the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, that's how I spell things, by typing them into Google. Alright, so let's compile this. And here's an equation. A squared plus b squared equals c squared is the Pythagorean theorem. Notice the spacing is nice. We've got superscripts as we like them. The variables are italicized. It looks like a professional equation, and that will look the same in your browser. Looks nice. So what I did was I started with a $sign and I ended with a $sign. I used a caret to indicate that the next character is going to be in the exponent. So now you can typeset equations too. And if you need help, look for LaTeX and equations, and there's lots of help out there for you. Alright, so that does it for this video. See you in the next one.